Welcome to Diplomatic Channel. On the program this week, we take you inside the visa section of the US Consulate in Lagos. Now, a lot of you have been in there, but do you really understand why some of your visas are being cancelled? We demystify what goes on inside to show that making your appointment and going in for an interview is more straightforward than you think. Also on the program, President Muhammadu Buhari has once spoken about Nigeria needing a new foreign policy. Nigeria is at that point where the whole world is watching with ears to the ground as to what's going on here. But how are we relating to the rest of the world? And that's equally important. Our guest this week tackles some foreign policy issues that may help chart the direction that we should be headed. Plus, it's getting tougher out there in Europe for the migrants and for European countries. Governments are criticized for not doing enough. So volunteer groups, non-governmental organizations, and even celebrities are making their way to the front lines to ensure the migrants get food and water, at least upon arrival of host countries. Those are our hot topics this week. In the meantime, go online to youtube.com/channelsweb to watch repeat editions of the program and tell us what you think. What should compose our foreign policy, and what do you make of the president's visit to France? Go to facebook.com/diplomatic channel or at diplomatic chan to express yourself. I am Amarachi Obani. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, it's almost total chaos in many European countries as the migrant situation has given the government a lot to think about. Thousands poured into Austria after they were turned away from Hungary following their arrival in Croatia. Police said about 9,000 people made their way across the Hungarian border on Saturday. The days have been long for these migrants who have left their lives behind, many coming from Syria away from the attacks by Islamic State militants trying to carve out a caliphate. On arriving in Croatia, they find aid and volunteer groups on hand providing food and water.
The migrants are in their thousands at the Croatian-Serbia border. Tired and exhausted, they make their way in, wondering if this could be the country they would eventually call home. There is no welcome party at the border. Instead, groups of aid volunteers have stepped in to provide temporary shelter. With the absence of a government agency to make the provisions, they are doing the best they can to provide some comforts for the visitors.
I don't really see a lot of government structure here, infrastructure here. I can't tell for other places, but we don't get any support, like official support or something. So it's kind of based on like free volunteers, like we're all doing that. We're no part of any organization or something. So we're just doing that on our free time. And that is kind of sad when you see that if we wouldn't be here, these people would have nothing.
But Croatia may not be a final destination for the migrant. After certainly finding itself in the path of Europe's biggest tide of migrants for decades, the country said on Friday it could no longer offer them refuge and would pass them on to other European countries. The migrants turned to Croatia when Hungary barred their route to the European Union through its southern border with Serbia, but a metal fence, tear gas and water cannon. More than 20,000 migrants, many of them Syria refugees, have streamed into Croatia since Tuesday, but they have been sent back, resulting in ugly exchanges between the two countries, reflecting the anger and ill feeling between the EU's 28 member states over what to do with the hundreds of thousands of migrants reaching its shores, fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East, Africa and Asia. Hungary, on the other hand, said Croatia lied in its face when it claimed to have secured bilateral agreement to transfer thousands of waiting migrants to the Hungarian border. The country's foreign minister, Peter Szijjarto, said the Croatian government had openly disregarded the European Union rules, leaving Hungary in the lurch to solve this unparalleled challenge alone. But there are other European countries refusing to be involved in the resolve of the continent's migrant situation. On Saturday, Turkish security forces dispersed some 1,000 migrants waiting on the highway after another attempt to march onto the country's land border with Greece. The migrants were put on buses, some were taken to an outdoor sports arena, and the others were taken back to other provinces, mainly Izmir and Istanbul. Hundreds of thousands have made the perilous journey by boat to Greek island of Turkey, but the spiraling death toll has seen more people make for its land borders. The country is currently sheltering more than 2 million Syrians and Iraqis, the largest refugee population in the world. Meanwhile, Denji, overcrowded with migrants and refugees, mainly from Afghanistan and Iran, had to be rescued on Saturday morning by foreign volunteers off the northern shore of the Greek island of Lesbos, as the engine of the boat had stopped working during the night. Those on board could be seen paddling with their hands and shouting for help as they approached the shore between the village of Skala Sikamnias and town of Molivos. Exhausted and terrified, they were eventually brought to safety and began crying, hugging, and some were celebrating. European Union leaders are scheduled to hold a meeting on Wednesday to again try to reach an agreement on how to share out about 120,000 people that have arrived on the continent.
Now, the largest number of migrants are coming from Syria, which has been fighting a civil war for 4 years now. It all started with calls for President Bashar al-Assad to step down. Countries in the West joined in, citing human rights violations in the country and President Assad's dictatorship as reasons. The unrest has dragged on for so long, and that's because there are more parties in the mix. The government forces, the rebels, and now the Islamic State. The United States is one of those countries calling for President Bashar al-Assad to step down. But according to the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, his departure has to be decided through negotiation.
The last year and a half,
Mr. Kerry's comments were made after holding talks with the British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond in London. One major topic in their discussion was Russia's military presence in Syria, a situation that has raised eyebrows.
Is Assad prepared to negotiate?
Although the U.S. Secretary of State welcomed Russia's involvement in fighting the Islamic State militant, the Western leaders believe the downside is that such help would affect negatively a political change, having called severally for President Assad to step down. Russia's build-up at Syria's Latakia air base has raised the possibility of air combat missions in Syrian airspace. Heavy Russian equipment, including tanks and helicopters, and naval infantry forces have been moved to Latakia, according to U.S. officials. As for President Assad, though the leaders had no specific time frame in mind for him to stay, they hope that Russia's goodwill will extend to bringing the Syrian president to the negotiating table.
We need to get to the negotiation. That's what we're looking for. And we hope Russia and any Iran, other countries with influence will help to bring about that, because that's what's preventing this crisis from ending. We're prepared to negotiate. Is Assad prepared to negotiate, really negotiate? Is Russia prepared to bring him to the table and actually find the solution to this violence?
British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond, who on September 9 said Britain could accept Assad staying in place for a transition period, said Assad could not be part of the Syria's long-term future, but now. The Syrian foreign minister, however, says Moscow's military support for Damascus is aimed at fighting terrorism, safeguarding Syria's statehood, and preventing a total catastrophe in the region. They also say Moscow is ready to share information on its military support for the Syrian government with Washington through appropriate channels. On Thursday, the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, arrived in Damascus, where he urged for a political solution to the Syrian conflict. The conflict is said to have killed an estimated 250,000 people since 2011, while as many as 7.6 million people are said to have been displaced from their homes.
When we come back after the break, sometimes they leave with smiles, other times it's with anger, anxiety, or relief. The many emotions you could experience when seeking a U.S. visa. That's coming up. Just stay with us.